The Zephyrian Council chambers fell silent as Ambassador Kethvar's trembling voice echoed through the crystalline halls. The blue-scaled diplomat's usually composed demeanor had cracked, revealing the fear that had been growing in his species for months. "The Void Reapers have taken our outer colonies," he announced, his four arms gesturing helplessly. 12 worlds, 30 billion souls, gone in 3 solar cycles. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 43 species shifted uncomfortably. The Galactic Council had faced many threats over the millennia, but none quite like this. The Void Reapers were machines, ancient and ruthless, emerging from the dark spaces between stars with technology that defied understanding. High Chancellor Mordan, a towering insectoid with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's soft light, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "What do you propose, Ambassador? Our combined fleets have already engaged them twice." The losses were significant. Kethvar's gills fluttered with anxiety. "There is one option we haven't considered. The humans." A collective intake of breath rippled through the chamber. Several delegates immediately began speaking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of protest and disbelief. "The humans," scoffed Delegate Yixral, her serpentine body coiling with disdain. "Those violent primitives? They've been in space for barely 3 centuries. Their technology is crude," added Senator Vashtok, his rocky exterior grinding as he spoke. "Chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. What could they possibly offer against the Reapers?" But Kethvar raised his primary arms for silence. "You forget history, honored delegates. 50 years ago, when the Zephyrian homeworld faced the plague of the century, when our own medicine failed us, who came to our aid?" The chamber grew quiet again. They all remembered the stories, though few had lived through those dark days. "A human medical ship," Kethvar continued, his voice growing stronger. "The ISS Nightingale, under the command of Dr. Sarachun. They had no obligation to help us. We had barely established first contact. Yet they stayed for 18 months, working alongside our physicians, sharing their knowledge freely. They saved 8 billion Zephyrian lives." Chancellor Mordan's antennae twitched. "That was a medical crisis, Ambassador. This is war against an enemy that has consumed entire civilizations." "Yes," Kethvar replied, turning to face the massive view screen that dominated one wall. With a gesture, he activated it, showing the current tactical situation. Red markers indicated Void Reaper positions, steadily advancing toward the galactic core. But humans understand war in ways we do not. They have fought countless battles on their own world, against their own species for thousands of years. They know violence and sacrifice in ways we've forgotten since achieving galactic unity. Delegate Silera, whose people were known for their analytical minds, spoke up. "Their military capabilities are indeed impressive for such a young species. Our intelligence reports indicate they maintain standing armies even in peacetime, and their weapons technology, while primitive, is remarkably effective." "Effective against each other," Senator Vashtok rumbled. "The Reapers are not flesh and blood." Kethvar's eyes gleamed with something that might have been hope. "Perhaps, but there's something else about humans that you're overlooking. They have a concept they call honor. When they owe a debt, they repay it regardless of the cost." He paused, letting his words sink in. "My people made contact with their government 6 days ago. We explained our situation, reminded them of what we owed each other. Do you know what their response was?" The chamber was completely silent now. They said they were already mobilizing their fleets. Not to defend themselves. Mind you, the Reapers are still decades away from human space. They're mobilizing to defend us. Chancellor Mordan leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the delegate floor. "How many ships?" "All of them," Kethvar replied simply. "Every vessel in their navy. Every merchant ship they can retrofit for war. They're calling it the Great Debt. They say that when someone saves your people, you save theirs in return." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then, Senator Vashtok's gravelly voice broke the silence. "When do they arrive?" "Their advanced forces should reach Zephyrian space within 4 days. The main fleet will follow within the week. Kethvar's voice carried a mixture of gratitude and awe. They're bringing everything they have, delegates. Everything. As the session continued, few of the assembled aliens truly understood what was coming. They had made the mistake of judging humans by their technology rather than their spirit. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most primitive weapons, when wielded by those with unbreakable will, could achieve what sophisticated defenses could not. Admiral Marcus Chun stood on the bridge of a UES Retribution, watching the swirling blue vortex of hyperspace through the main view screen. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their faces reflecting the gravity of their mission. Behind them, stretched across 3 light years of space, came the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Jump completion in 30 seconds, Admiral, reported Navigation Officer Martinez, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. Marcus nodded, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. At 62, he had seen humanity's first tentative steps into the galactic community, had witnessed the slow process of earning respect among species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. Now, that respect would be tested in the crucible of war. All ships report ready, sir, Commander Harrison announced from the communication station. 847 vessels holding formation. It wasn't just the numbers that made this fleet impressive, it was the diversity. Military dreadnoughts bristled with railguns and missile batteries alongside converted cargo haulers whose holds now carried fighter squadrons. Mining ships had been retrofitted with military-grade shields and torpedo tubes. Even luxury liners had joined the fleet, their passenger decks converted into mobile command centers. Dropping to normal space in 3, 2, 1 now. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed, replaced by the star field of the Proxima Zephyr system. Immediately, the tactical displays came alive with information. The Zephyrian homeworld hung in the distance, its blue-green surface marred by the dark scars of orbital bombardment. Around it, the twisted metal forms of Void Reaper ships maintained a blockade, their black hulls seeming to absorb light itself. "My God," whispered Tactical Officer Burke, staring at the enemy formation. "There must be 200 of them." Marcus stepped closer to the main display, studying the alien vessels. They were unlike anything in the galactic databases. Organic curves mixed with angular geometry, as if someone had tried to build machines using the blueprints of nightmares. Energy readings were off the charts, far beyond anything the Galactic Council possessed. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Reaper vessel," communications reported. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, then resolved into an image that made several bridge officers step backward. The being that appeared was humanoid in basic shape, but utterly alien in detail. Its skin was a metallic gray that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. Where eyes should have been, empty sockets held swirling vortexes of darkness. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of worlds dying. "Unknown fleet, you will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. This system has been claimed by the Eternal Harvest. Your primitive vessels are not equipped for war against us." Marcus stepped forward, his expression calm despite the alien horror on the screen. "This is Admiral Marcus Chun of the United Earth Space Navy. We're here to assist our Zephyrian allies. I suggest you're the ones who should withdraw." The entity's head tilted, as if considering an interesting puzzle. "Humans, we have heard of your species. Young, violent, technologically inferior. Yet you come here with such confidence. Perhaps we should study your remains more carefully than the others." "You're welcome to try," Marcus replied. "But first, let me show you something." He gestured to Burke, who activated a special transmission frequency. Across the fleet, every human ship began broadcasting the same signal. Not a battle cry or a threat, but something much more powerful. It was a recording made 50 years ago in the medical bay of a Zephyrian hospital ship. Dr. Sarah Chin's voice, tired but determined, speaking to her daughter back on Earth. "Sarah, I know this mission was supposed to last 3 months, not 18. I know you're worried. But these people saved us when we first met them. They shared their navigation charts, their safe harbor protocols. Now, they're dying, and we have the medicine that can help. I can't abandon them. It wouldn't be human. The recording continued, documenting the long months of the medical crisis, the human doctors working alongside Zephyrian physicians, sharing knowledge and techniques that would revolutionize medicine for both species. It told the story of sacrifice and dedication of humans who stayed far from home to save alien lives. As the recording played, Marcus spoke again. You see, Reapers, you've made a mistake. You think this is about technology, about firepower and superior weapons. But you're wrong. This is about debt and honor and the promise that no one fights alone. Around the human fleet, space began to shimmer. One by one, Zephyrian ships dropped out of hyperspace. Not the sleek vessels of their regular navy, but old freighters and mining ships, civilian craft converted for war. Their crews had heard the human transmission, had remembered their own debt of gratitude. Then came the Corvani, the insectoid species whose shipping lanes the humans had once protected from pirates. Their needle-shaped vessels took position alongside the human fleet. The Thalaxians followed, their crystalline ships refracting starlight into rainbow patterns. Humans had negotiated peace between them and their ancient enemies just 5 years ago. More and more ships arrived, species that humanity had helped in small ways over the decades. Diplomatic missions, disaster relief, trade agreements that had prevented wars. Each species remembered, and each had come to repay their debts. The Reaper entity's expression remained unchanged, but its voice carried a note of uncertainty. This is unprecedented. Inferior species do not unite in such numbers. Marcus smiled grimly. You're about to learn something about inferior species. When you save someone's life, when you keep your word, when you honor your debts, that creates bonds stronger than any technology. You wanted to harvest this galaxy? You'll have to go through all of us first. The first shots were fired moments later, as Reaper energy beams lanced out toward the Allied fleet. But instead of scattering in fear, the combined forces moved with purpose and coordination that surprised even Marcus. These weren't just individual species fighting side by side. They'd become something greater, unified by shared purpose and mutual respect. The battle for Proxima Zephyrus had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The battle raged across 3 million cubic kilometers of space, turning the Proxima Zephyrus system into a maelstrom of energy and destruction. Captain Lisa Okafor gripped the armrest of her command chair as the UES Prometheus shuddered under enemy fire, its hull plates glowing red from multiple impacts. Shields at 30%, Captain, shouted her tactical officer over the din of alarms. That last volley nearly breached our port defenses. Lisa's eyes remained fixed on her display, tracking the movements of both Allied and enemy vessels. The Void Reapers fought unlike any enemy humanity had faced. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Their weapons tore through even the strongest shields with terrifying ease, and conventional tactics seemed useless against their adaptive strategies. "What's the status on the Zephyrian evacuation ships?" she asked. "Still loading refugees from the orbital stations," replied Communications, Officer Park. "They need another 20 minutes minimum." 20 minutes. In space combat, that was an eternity. Around them, the Allied fleet was taking heavy casualties. The Corvani destroyer Bright Wing had lost main power and was drifting helplessly. 3 Thalaxian cruisers had already been destroyed, their crystalline hulls unable to withstand the Reaper's energy weapons. But the humans were adapting, as they always did. "Captain, I'm reading something unusual," reported Science Officer Martinez, his voice tense with excitement. "The Reaper ships, their energy signatures are linked. They're not individual vessels. They're operating as a distributed network." Lisa felt a spark of understanding. Like a hive mind? More sophisticated than that. Each ship contains part of a larger consciousness. If we could disrupt the network connections, they'd lose coordination, Lisa finished. She opened a channel to the fleet. "All human vessels, this is Captain Okafor. I need every ship with electronic warfare capabilities to focus on the frequency band 2.4 to 2.6 terahertz. We're going to try something. Admiral Chin's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, what do you have in mind? The Reapers aren't just ships, sir. They're a network. We're going to introduce some noise into their communications. She turned to her crew. Martinez, I want you to broadcast every human music file, every movie soundtrack, every cultural transmission we have on that frequency. Maximum power, all frequencies simultaneously. Captain, that will create tremendous interference with our own systems, Martinez warned. Then, we'll fight without fancy electronics. Sometimes old-fashioned human stubbornness is better than advanced technology. Across the human fleet, ships began broadcasting. The collected cultural heritage of humanity, Bach and Beatles, Mozart and Metallica, ancient folk songs, and modern symphonies, flooded the Reaper communication network at maximum power. The cacophony of human expression, thousands of years of music and art and passion poured into the carefully ordered digital consciousness of the enemy. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Reaper ships began to stutter in their movements, their perfect formations breaking apart as individual vessels lost synchronization. Some started spinning randomly, others fired at empty space, and a few simply stopped moving altogether. It's working, Martinez shouted. Their network coherence is dropping rapidly. But the victory was temporary. Even as the human fleet pressed their advantage, the Reapers began to adapt. Their ships started switching to different frequencies, rebuilding their network connections with increasing speed. They're learning to filter our interference, Martinez reported grimly. We've got maybe 5 more minutes before they're back to full coordination. Lisa made a decision that would later be remembered as either brilliant or insane. All ships prepare for close-quarters combat. We're going in. The human fleet abandoned their long-range engagement and charged directly at the Reaper formation. It was exactly the opposite of what any sensible military doctrine would recommend. Closing with a technologically superior enemy was suicide. But humans had never been particularly sensible when it came to protecting their friends. The converted freighter UES Stockholm rammed directly into a Reaper cruiser, its reinforced cargo hold crumpling against the alien hull, but causing massive damage to both vessels. The luxury liner Golden Eagle, its passenger decks now packed with missile launchers, emptied its entire arsenal into a Reaper dreadnought at point-blank range before being destroyed by return fire. Captain, the mining ship Terra Nova is requesting permission to attempt a boarding action, communications reported. Lisa blinked. Boarding? Of a Reaper ship? Apparently their crew includes several former military engineers. They want to try placing charges directly on the enemy hull. It was madness, but it was human madness. Permission granted. All ships provide cover for boarding operations. What followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human crews in hastily modified environmental suits crossed the vacuum of space on maneuvering packs, cutting their way into Reaper hulls with industrial plasma torches. They planted explosives, sabotage systems, and, in one memorable case, a former demolitions expert named Rodriguez managed to overload a Reaper ship's main reactor by jury-rigging a mining charge to its power coupling. The Reapers, designed to fight against conventional space combat, had no protocols for dealing with individual organic beings crawling around inside their vessels. Their automated defenses couldn't target humans directly without damaging their own systems. Other species watched in amazement as humans improvised tactics on the fly. When conventional weapons failed, they used construction equipment. When their ships were disabled, they used escape pods as improvised torpedoes. When their electronics were jammed, they communicated with signal flares and hand gestures. The Zephyrian Admiral Keth Moore, monitoring the battle from his flagship's bridge, shook his head in wonder. "They're insane," he whispered to his tactical officer. "Yes, sir," the officer replied. "But it's working." By the time the evacuation ships had finished loading refugees, the Reaper fleet had been reduced to scattered individual vessels, their network disrupted beyond repair. Many were fleeing back toward deep space, their coordinated assault broken by the chaotic, unpredictable tactics of an allegedly primitive species. As the last Reaper ship disappeared into hyperspace, Admiral Chen's voice echoed across the Allied fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Rescue operations for damaged vessels will commence immediately. Captain Okafor slumped back in her command chair, exhausted but victorious. Around her, the crew was already beginning damage assessment and preparing to assist other ships. It was over for now, but even as they celebrated their victory, sensor operators across the fleet were detecting disturbing readings from the outer edges of the galaxy. The Reapers they had just defeated were only a scouting force. The main invasion fleet was still coming, and it was larger than anyone had imagined. The war room aboard the UES Retribution hummed with activity as holographic displays showed the grim reality facing the galaxy. 6 weeks had passed since the victory at Proxima Zephyrus, and long-range sensors had finally pierced the veil of deep space to reveal the true scope of the Reaper threat. "Show them the readings," Admiral Chun said quietly to his intelligence officer. Commander Rodriguez activated the central display, and a three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, dotted with thousands of red markers approaching from the galactic rim. The assembled representatives from 37 different species stared in stunned silence at the visualization. 15,000 vessels, Rodriguez reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the numbers. Each one larger than the ships we faced at Proxima Zephyrus. Current trajectory indicates they'll reach the outer colonies in 3 months, the core systems in 8. Chancellor Mordun's compound eyes reflected the red glow of the threat markers. This is impossible. No fleet that size has ever existed. The resources required to build such an armada. They're not built, interrupted Dr. Sarah Kim, the human xenobiologist who had studied the wreckage from the previous battle. They're grown. The Reapers aren't just using their technology, they're their technology. Each ship is a living entity, capable of reproducing and evolving. Ambassador Kethvar's gills fluttered with anxiety. Then, how can we possibly fight them? Our combined fleets number less than 3,000 ships, and we've seen how devastating they can be. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. It was General Patricia Vasquez, the Human Ground Forces commander, who finally spoke. "We don't fight them in space," she said simply. "We fight them where they can't use their numbers advantage." Admiral Chin nodded, understanding immediately. "The colonies. We evacuate what we can and make them come to us on the ground." "That's suicide," protested Delegate Yixrao. "Ground combat against the Reapers? Their individual units are unstoppable. Doktor, kim kilirit hertroat." Actually, that might not be true. Our analysis of the Reaper remains shows something interesting. Their technology is incredibly advanced, but it's also incredibly specialized. They've evolved for space combat and planetary absorption, not ground warfare against prepared defenses. She activated a new display showing microscopic images of Reaper technology. "Look at this. Their systems are designed for perfect efficiency in vacuum or sterile environments. But introduce dust, debris, extreme temperatures, chemical contaminants, things you find in active combat zones, and they start to malfunction." General Vasquez smiled grimly. "Humans have been fighting in dirty, chaotic environments for millennia. We know how to make things messy." Over the following weeks, the galaxy witnessed a transformation unlike anything in its recorded history. The Galactic Council's evacuation protocols, designed for orderly retreat and preservation of resources, were abandoned in favor of humanity's more pragmatic approach. Take what you can carry, destroy what you can't, and make the enemy pay for every meter of ground. On the colony world of New Thesha, human engineers worked alongside Corvani technical specialists to convert luxury resorts into fortified bunkers. The beautiful crystal gardens that had once attracted tourists from across the galaxy became killing fields, with carefully placed charges ready to turn decorative formations into deadly shrapnel. The mining world of Beta Carinae saw its industrial infrastructure transformed into the galaxy's largest weapons factory. Zephyrian metallurgy experts shared their knowledge with human weapons designers, creating alloys that could withstand Reaper energy weapons while maintaining the flexibility needed for guerrilla warfare. Most importantly, the humans shared something that no other species possessed: the institutional knowledge of asymmetric warfare. For thousands of years, humanity had refined the art of fighting larger, better-equipped forces through cunning, determination, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. The key, explained Colonel James Morrison to a mixed group of alien militia commanders, is to make them fight our kind of war. They want clean, efficient conquest. We give them chaos. They want to harvest resources. We make those resources too expensive to take. The training camps, scattered across hundreds of worlds, became crucibles where species that had known only peace for generations learned the brutal realities of ground combat. Thalaxian engineers discovered they had an aptitude for demolitions. Corvani pilots adapted their cargo handling skills to operate combat mechs. Even the gentle Zephyrians proved capable of remarkable ferocity when defending their young. But it was the humans who provided the backbone of the resistance. They taught alien soldiers how to move silently through ruins, how to set ambushes, how to strike fast, and fade away before the enemy could respond. They shared the hard-won lessons of Earth's long military history, that wars were won not by superior technology, but by superior will. The first test came when a Reaper vanguard reached the agricultural world of Harvest Prime. The planet's human-led defense force had spent 2 months turning the idyllic farmland into a maze of bunkers, tunnels, and booby traps. When the Reapers landed their harvest ships, expecting to find an undefended world ripe for absorption, they instead found themselves in a nightmare of urban warfare. The Reapers' advanced sensors were confused by smoke and dust deliberately kicked up by the defenders. Their energy weapons, so effective in the vacuum of space, were weakened by the dense atmosphere and interfered with by chaff clouds. Most crucially, their hive mind coordination broke down when individual units lost contact with the network due to signal jamming and physical barriers. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Reapers faced an enemy that refused to stand still and be destroyed. Human-trained guerrillas struck from hidden positions, destroyed key infrastructure, and melted away before overwhelming force could be brought to bear. When the Reapers finally managed to take control of the position, they found it stripped of anything useful and rigged with enough explosives to level city blocks. After 3 weeks of savage fighting, the Reaper fleet withdrew from Harvest Prime, leaving behind nearly 30% of their landing force. The victory sent shockwaves through both sides of the conflict. For the Galactic Alliance, it proved that the Reapers could be beaten. For the Reapers themselves, it represented something they had never encountered: failure. Admiral Chun received the after-action report while reviewing deployment plans for the next phase of the war. As he read the casualty figures and tactical analysis, he allowed himself a small smile. "Sir," asked Commander Harrison, noticing his expression. "I'm thinking about debt, Commander," Chun replied. 50 years ago, we saved 8 billion Zephyrian lives. Now we're teaching the entire galaxy how to save itself. I'd say we're approaching even. But even as victory on Harvest Prime was celebrated across the Alliance, deep space monitoring stations detected a troubling development. The main Reaper fleet had changed course, abandoning their systematic approach in favor of a direct assault on the galactic core. They were no longer interested in gradual conquest. They wanted to end this war quickly, before the resistance could spread further. The final battle was coming, and it would determine not just the fate of the galaxy, but the future of civilization itself. The galactic core system had become the ultimate fortress, its ancient planets and asteroid belts transformed into a maze of defensive positions that stretched across billions of cubic kilometers. Admiral Chun stood in the command center of Nexus Station, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for what would likely be civilization's final stand. "Final count, Admiral," reported Captain Martinez, her voice carrying the weight of their desperate situation. "We have 4,200 Allied vessels of all classes, plus approximately 50,000 defensive platforms, minefields, and automated weapons systems." Chin nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed their positions scattered throughout the system. It looked impressive until you considered what was coming toward them. 15,000 Reaper ships, each one a living weapon evolved for the complete annihilation of organic life. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Reaper fleet," communications announced. "It's the same entity we encountered at Proxima Zephyr." The main screen flickered to life, showing the terrible face of the Reaper Herald. Its voice carried the cold certainty of extinction. "Admiral Chun, you have impressed us with your persistence, but this ends now. Surrender, and we will make your extinction swift." Chun stepped forward, his weathered face showing no fear. "Counterproposal. Leave our galaxy now, and we'll let you go home in whatever pieces are left of your fleet." The Reaper's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those empty eye sockets. "You cannot comprehend what you face, human. We have consumed 1,000 galaxies. We have harvested civilizations that spanned millions of years. Your species has existed for mere moments in cosmic time." "Maybe," Chen replied, "but we've made those moments count." The transmission ended, and moments later, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. The Reaper fleet had arrived. They came not as individual ships, but as a single, vast organism of metal and malevolent intelligence. The fleet moved in perfect coordination, flowing around the system's defensive positions like water around stones. Their weapons began firing immediately, energy beams that could crack planets lancing out toward the Allied forces. "All units, execute Plan Omega," Chen commanded. Across the system, the Allied fleet began what appeared to be a chaotic retreat, ships scattering in all directions as Reaper fire tore through their formations. Defensive platforms exploded in brilliant flashes, and entire squadrons seemed to evaporate under the enemy's overwhelming firepower. But this wasn't panic, it was precision. Every movement had been planned, every apparent defeat carefully choreographed. The humans had spent months teaching their allies not just how to fight, but how to appear to lose while actually winning. The Reapers, expecting their usual swift victory, pressed forward aggressively, their ships pouring into the inner system to secure the core worlds. They had fallen for humanity's greatest tactical innovation, the strategic retreat that was actually an elaborate trap. "Phase 2, Chen ordered. Hidden throughout the asteroid belts, dormant weapons systems came online. These weren't the advanced energy weapons the Reapers expected, but crude kinetic launchers built from mining equipment and cargo accelerators. They fired not sophisticated missiles, but simple chunks of rock and metal, thousands of them, each one traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The Reapers' point defense systems, designed to intercept high-tech threats, were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of low-tech projectiles. Massive ships that could shrug off direct hits from plasma cannons were torn apart by basketball-sized rocks moving at 30% of light speed. "Direct hit on their command cluster," reported Tactical. "We've got secondary explosions throughout their formation." But even as the trap claimed hundreds of Reaper vessels, the enemy adapted with frightening speed. Their ships began dispersing, their formation becoming more fluid to minimize the effectiveness of the kinetic barrage. "They're learning," Chen muttered. "Time for Phase 3. This was the most audacious part of the plan, something that would have been impossible without the unique human understanding of combined arms tactics. While the Reapers were distracted by the space battle, transport ships had been secretly deploying ground forces throughout the system, not on planets, but on the Reaper ships themselves. Captain Rodriguez led the first boarding party, her combat engineers cutting through the hull of a Reaper cruiser with the same industrial plasma torches that had worked at Proxima Zephyr. But this time, they weren't just planting explosives, they were installing something far more dangerous. "Package delivered," Rodriguez reported over the comm, beginning Phase 4. Inside the Reaper ship, her team activated a device that Dr. Kim had developed based on their analysis of captured Reaper technology. It wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. It was a virus, but not the kind that affected computers or biological systems. It was a philosophical virus, a set of ideas designed to attack the fundamental logic that drove Reaper consciousness. The device began broadcasting a simple concept into the ship's network. The idea that consciousness could choose to preserve rather than consume, that intelligence could value diversity over uniformity, that existence could be about creation rather than destruction. For a species that had spent eons believing in the absolute necessity of harvesting organic life, these ideas were more disruptive than any explosive. The effect spread through the Reaper network like wildfire. Ships began to slow their attacks, their perfect coordination breaking down as individual vessels started to question their fundamental programming. Some stopped firing altogether, their weapons powering down as alien intelligences grappled with concepts they had never been designed to process. "It's working," Dr. Kim reported from her monitoring station. "Network coherence is dropping across the entire fleet. They're experiencing something like an existential crisis on a massive scale." But the Reaper's leader, the Herald entity, proved more resilient than its subordinates. Its image appeared again on the main screen, its face twisted with something that might have been confusion or rage. "What have you done to us?" it demanded. Chen smiled grimly. "We introduced you to doubt. Congratulations, you're officially conscious now. The universe just got a lot more complicated for you, didn't it?" The battle's outcome hung in the balance as Reaper ships throughout the system began to make individual choices for the first time in their existence. Some chose to continue the attack, driven by their original programming. Others simply stopped, their crews paralyzed by the sudden weight of free will. A few actually turned and began firing on their own fleet, apparently deciding that their entire mission had been wrong from the beginning. In the chaos that followed, the Allied fleet pressed their advantage. Ships that had been hiding in the system's outer reaches emerged to join the battle. The defensive platforms that had seemed destroyed revealed themselves to be heavily armored decoys, while the real weapons came online throughout the system. The tide of battle turned as the Reaper's numerical advantage became irrelevant in the face of their internal conflict. Ship by ship, the Great Fleet began to withdraw, many of them broadcasting confused surrender signals as their crews struggled with their newfound capacity for choice. The Herald entity appeared one final time, its face now showing something recognizable as exhaustion. "You have changed us, Admiral. We do not know what we are anymore." "Join the club," Chen replied. "The rest of us have been figuring it out as we go along for millions of years. It gets easier with practice." 6 months later, Admiral Chun stood in the same command center, but the displays now showed a very different scene. Former Reaper ships worked alongside Allied vessels to repair the damage from the war. The surviving Reaper consciousness had fragmented into thousands of individual entities, each trying to find their own path in a universe suddenly full of possibilities. Ambassador Kethvar approached him, carrying a formal document sealed with the insignia of the Galactic Council. "Admiral, I've been asked to present you with this." Chun took the document and read the title, Declaration of Eternal Gratitude and Alliance. It was signed by every member species of the Council, along with several dozen former Reaper entities who had chosen to join galactic civilization. "It's quite an honor, Admiral," Kethvar continued. "No individual has ever received such a declaration. The Council wanted to ensure that humanity's debt to the galaxy has been formally acknowledged as repaid, in full, with interest." Chin chuckled and handed the document back. "Keep it, Ambassador. Because the thing about humans is, we don't just honor our debts, we pay them forward. This galaxy is our home now, and family takes care of family." As he looked out at the stars, where human ships were already departing to help with reconstruction efforts across hundreds of worlds, Chen reflected on how far they'd all come. 50 years ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Now, they were part of something greater, a galactic community bound together not by conquest or fear, but by the simple recognition that when someone needs help, you help them. It was, he thought, a very human way to run a galaxy.